I'm the outside.
Are you reading or telling
Text works, but not phone.
Chris, Angie, and Charlie, my glasses with the bifocals broke. So I'm not making a face save, I have to look over the top and see my
We can get started. Computer, Charlie.
terrible.
It does work.
I feel
It makes you look smarter.
Really?
Yeah, I think we should go with it.
Okay, we'll call the school board meeting to order. The meeting has been properly noticed. Jan, can you roll call, please?
Chris Freeman,
Here.
Mark Hillman, Connie Gooseby, here. Clint Moses,
Here.
Carl Palmer,
Here.
Amy Riddles Monson, here. Charlie Schneider,
Here.
Angie Skillings, here. David Steyer.
Here. Okay, we have quorum to conduct business. Agenda order approval revision, does anybody have anything for tonight? I would ask for, Good, go ahead.
I'd like to ask if it'd be possible if we move action item 2B to a future date for a closed meeting.
We have a motion, second,
Second.
Chris. All those in favor, we just do a voice vote. All those in favor,
Said your voice on, okay.
I know.
Sorry.
all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries by unanimous vote. Okay, recommendation and commendations, we have none for tonight. Community communications, we do have two that were submitted, and Janet,
All right.
please.
Okay, this is regarding the need to improve
Joe,
the
Thanks, Dave.
The need to improve the COVID safety plan. Dear members of the Board of Education, things are looking pretty bad in the SDMA right now. After a few weeks of very high exclusions in our classroom, school has now been canceled for 2 days due to a lack of staff and employee burnout. Given the severity of the situation, I was disappointed to see that the issue isn't on the agenda either as a possible action item or even a discussion item. As stewards of our children's education, the board has an obligation to work together with each other and the community to find ways to keep our schools open and students in the physical classroom. I've been saving some of the historical data from the SDMA COVID dashboard since September, and the data show a compelling story about the effectiveness of widespread masking and keeping exclusions down when compared to the previous policy of mask optional, quarantine optional from mid-September. Exclusions are high right now, yes, but please remember that they were also this bad in September prior to the K-12 mask mandate being put in place, even though coronavirus activity was much lower within our community. For example, on September 17th, River Heights had an exclusion rate of 27.74%. The overall exclusion rate across the district was 9.46%, and there were 0.92% active cases, COVID cases. Compare that to November 20th, when 9.12% of students were excluded district-wide with 2% active cases. Even though there were more than double the number of cases in November, there were fewer exclusions overall. It took some time for the exclusion rates to come down in October, but after the K-6 mask requirement was implemented, which was expected for a number of reasons. Once it came down, though, exclusions across the district were by and large unremarkable until COVID cases started to surge again in Benton County in November. Now coronavirus activity is too high in our region, even for the current COVID safety plan, to be effective at keeping exclusions down and schools open. There's good reason to believe it would have been even worse without the mask requirement in place. The current safety plan isn't good enough, yet in mid-December, When the mask requirement expires, the plan is going to become even weaker. I hate to see what might happen if no changes are made to strengthen the plan. The board needs to work together to find a way to improve it so that our schools can stay open and our kids can stay in the classroom.
And that was from,
Monica Baird.
thank you.
And the second one is our kindergartner had no school on Friday because there weren't enough bus drivers. She has no school Monday or Tuesday because there aren't enough teachers. SDMA is facing a severe ongoing staffing shortage. I've seen this happen before at large and small companies across the research, tech, and defense industries. When an organization cannot retain or hire employees, or cover time off, or maintain reliable operations through times of stress, then this is a clear sign that employees are underpaid, under-supported, and unrespected. This failure of operations is not a consequence of our current crisis. It is due to a long-term cascading failure of leadership at multiple levels. The members of the state legislature have consistently and intentionally forced local school districts into impossible situations through levy limits that prevent local citizens from adequately supporting their own schools, and by stripping public employees of collective negotiation of good contracts that would make teaching and school administration into an attractive career. Over time, the state legislature has undermined the school board. The SDMA School Board has ignored administrators' professional recommendations and has prevented administrators from taking a public educational outreach role in the overall well-being of our community. Over time, the school board has undermined the administration. The administration has developed a widely known reputation of stifling concerns raised by teachers and staff, many of whom are convinced they will be fired immediately if they speak honestly outside the chain of command. Over time, the administration has undermined the teachers. In the end, everything comes down to the teachers and staff and bus drivers who are hardworking, frustrated, exhausted, and underpaid. Start from the bottom and empower each layer. Empower the teachers, give them a respective seat on the school board. Make it clear that no teacher will ever be punished for speaking honestly or publicly about their experience. Empower the administration and let principals organize public health educational campaigns in their community. Empower school boards by telling the legislature that citizens deserve the freedom and flexibility of local control over their own tax levies. Yours, Abraham Smith.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to make sure there's a pretty big misconception out there right now in regards to why there's no school for students today and tomorrow. And unfortunately, the message that I put out to families was not adequately interpreted by the media outlets that covered it. It was very clear in my message that the days off today and tomorrow are because our staff members have been worked so hard, and it has been a difficult fall, we all know that. But the school is not closed Monday and Tuesday this week because it cannot be staffed. It's closed because our teachers need planning time. And it was made abundantly clear in that message, but I do
Just push the button.
It's on now? Yeah. Hi, my name is Joseph Hillman. I live in Knapp, and that's part of the Menomonie School District. So school board members, Dr. Zajdowski, and Menomonie community. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to make public comment. My area of concern continues to be the Menomonie High School Gender Policy Plan. I pointedly asked the school board to put this plan on the agenda to be scrutinized. They seem to be afraid to. The one time it was on the agenda, there was a vote to table it, no discussion happened. There seems to be a fear of a lawsuit if the plan is changed. Here's just a bit of reviewing the plan. I quote, "Assisting our students with gender-related transitions is vital to the success of our district," unquote. Transitions are vital to success? What are our students transitioning to? You cannot change a male into a female, or vice versa, no matter how many dangerous hormones you prescribe or surgeries you perform. Why would any teacher or counselor want to help a student onto such a false, dark, and immoral path? I quote, "Parents who do not support their child's transition will be encouraged to assist in the transitional process by counseling staff, but their participation is not required," unquote. What? Teachers and counselors are being encouraged to educate the parents that this transitional process is good for the health and well-being of their own child? What kind of upside-down reasoning is this? I quote again, "Staff are versed in various ways to help aid students who are transitioning and are encouraged to ask students which pronouns they prefer and how they can best be supported in their classroom," unquote. What? Young adolescent foolish people are being asked how they will be addressed? They can change their names and pronouns at will? There is power in a name. Parents choose names for a reason. One thing names are meant to identify is the sex of the person. The sex of a person does not change their entire life. It cannot. The legal birth name should be affirmed, nothing else. Anything else is dangerous imagination and not reality. It leads people into a state of mental and spiritual confusion. Emotional confusion mishandled can lead to self-loathing and even suicide. LGBTQ+ are all sexual perversions. Identifying with any of them is an act of rebellion against the creator of the human being. We want our school policy to affirm righteousness for the health of every student and every family in Menomonie.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Andrew Shu.
My name's Andrew. I live out by Wheeler and Colfax, but my son's primary placement is in Menomonie. I think by now all of you know what I come here to say. I don't mean to. I wish we could all work together, but it seems like few of you seem to not really care, despite your little disclaimer at the beginning, what we have to say. But my son has been being mistreated at school. I don't understand why it is okay to make a child sit and miss recess and other parts of school, including learning, which is the primary point of school. He has been abused and mistreated because of this nonsensical mask mandate that clearly is not working. We all know that they're not wearing masks because of health, they're all wearing masks because of a lawsuit. I don't know where doing the right thing got pushed aside due to lawsuits. I personally would stand by doing the right thing, no matter who wanted to sue me for what. So yeah, my son's missing recess. I would like an answer as to why that is okay. Can somebody give me an idea of why my son is being forced to miss recess because he doesn't perfectly comply to your guys' rules that are obviously and on video record not for health? It has changed. There is proof on YouTube that it is because of a lawsuit, not for health. So now explain to me why my son is missing recess because of this. Can anybody say anything, or are you too afraid? Come on now, let's work together. Please?
Would you like me to answer, Mr. Schultz?
Why is my 8-year-old son being forced to sit in a chair during recess? Yes, I would like an answer.
My answer is I would be happy to speak with you, but I'm not going to do it in this public format. But if you'd like to have a private conversation, I'd be happy to do that.
I'm so frustrated with you guys. Why is it okay for a child to suffer at school because of this, while it's okay for you to sit up here and not? Last meeting, you guys were joking about passing a mic around because you guys are having problems and joking about, we're talking about spreading disease, but now we have to pass a mic around. We're real serious about this, but now you're still forcing my child to suffer at school. I can look up the video. You guys were joking about passing a mic around during this pandemic. But yet my 8-year-old son
Okay.
has to suffer.
Thank you. Final speaker is Brittany Weicker.
Brittany Weicker, North Menomonie. Forced masking and vaccination of our children is unethical. It was recently brought to my attention that only medical doctors can require you to use a medical device. Further research found requiring someone to wear a mask is a medical intervention. Unless you are a licensed medical professional, you have no authority to recommend such a practice. Further, a surgical mask is designated by the FDA as a medical device. You have no authority, responsibility, or liability to require that of any of your customers or employees, meaning the students. No emergency order supersedes law. No health order related to mask wearing any health order related to mask wearing is unlawful and unenforceable by law. I looked at Dunn County COVID numbers today. Let's do an activity. They say people learn differently, right? Hearing, seeing, doing. Let's do a demonstration. All of you raise your fingers. Yeah, put them down. One more time. 10 of you plus me, that makes 11. It's 110 fingers. Sorry, I got 220 without mark here. I had to rewrite my numbers. Now I have another 66. That's the total number of new cases in the last 7 days. 286 cases in Dunn County. Let's compare that to how many active cases are hospitalized. I don't need any participation for this one. It's 10. I don't even have to participate to tell you how many deaths in the last 7 days. There are 0 from COVID. Tell me again why our kids are masking. I've talked to quite a few parents that feel uneasy about the announcement of no school district. The way it was leaked, hidden, and denied seems pretty sketchy. The way it was approached allowed the media to blow it out of proportion and further emphasize the craziness that surrounds COVID. Thank you for addressing that. Please bring back common sense. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our community communications for tonight. Our next part of the agenda is the action portion of the agenda. Item 2A, action to approve 2022-2023 academic calendar. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Carl, second.
I'm sorry, what?
Did you second?
I thought you raised your hand.
Wait a second, I say.
I'll second it then.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able,
Sorry.
it's nice to be able to see everybody at least, I will say that. Okay, we have a motion and a second. This is the calendar that we talked about at our last meeting. Joe, are there any changes?
I think the only slight change had to do with when parent-teacher conference would be. The principals talked to staff members and wanted to make sure there was the least number of conflicts possible. So I think the middle school parent-teacher conferences were changed just a little bit, but otherwise it should be ready to go. It's the same number of contract days, same number of student days. Again, we cannot start until September 1st due to state statute, but it allows us to get done the first week of June the way it's written.
This has our last day of school as the 2nd of June, so. Any questions or discussion before our time?
Just a question, if the planning time is helpful for the teachers over the Thanksgiving break, can we consider then for next, I know we didn't have our meeting until the day after, or we had our meeting before, but for the past 2 years, the feedback has seemed to be extremely positive to have them as professional days over the Thanksgiving break. Is that can be something that can be considered?
I would love to have the whole Thanksgiving break off. I think there is something to be said for that in terms of giving staff members an opportunity for planning time. I mean, even without the pandemic, this is a busy time of year. I would say though that we would then probably be looking at 2 days, and the calendar's so packed in and tight already because of that intent to try to get done the first week of June. For this next year, looking at it, that would bring all the kids back Monday, June 5th, and Tuesday, June 6th. So, I think we'll get more production on November 21st and November 22nd than we will on June 5th and June 6th.
Okay, thanks.
Glenn?
I actually wondered the same thing, but I'm curious, how many snow days are built into this? I didn't see where it says that on there, so if we ended up pushing back into the second week of June, what would it take to get there?
Well, the good thing about our calendar, and just for a little history, I think it was 3 years ago when we had, 11 snow days or something like that. And we had to put, I think it was 15 minutes on the end of the day to make up the time so we didn't have to have additional days, because no one wants to come back that second week of June. And the feedback we got actually was that the teachers really thought that time was productive. So we still modified the calendar back a little bit, or the schedule back a little bit, but there is plenty of instructional time built in. So with that instructional time built in, I highly doubt, even in a year where we have a few snow days, that we would have to bring the students back for additional days. Also, we do have the professional development day on, there we go, April 10th. So a lot of times by that time we know where we're at. Very rarely do we have a snow day after April 10th. So there could be the potential to turn April 10th into a student day. Or, see, it used to be you had to have 180 days of school, but that's been changed now for a while. So instead we could add a little time after spring break or even the last couple months of school if we felt that we weren't gonna make the required hours of instruction. So I'm not too concerned with that.
Thanks.
It sounds like there is some flexibility in the calendar as well, so in a year like this where we decide to take the 2 days, we're not looking to add extra days on to the end of the year, depending on how the snow days go.
Right.
Joe, do you remember how many days of snow days we absorbed with that 15 minutes?
I can't remember the exact number, Carl. It was quite a few.
Did we used to start after Labor Day? I mean, when you talk about getting the most out of 2 days, do we really get anything out of the Thursday and Friday before Labor Day? Because I know my daughter didn't attend, just because we had travel and whatnot,
Yep.
so.
That's a good question. I would say that starting early is really important. And I think people actually like having the transition into the school year where it's not full week. A lot of that check-in stuff, establishing routines. I know for a lot of students, the first day especially is kind of a tough day because, kind of like we've all been there where every teacher or every instructor, every professor is going through the syllabus and setting expectations. So then you kind of come back after Labor Day and I'm not saying we don't do instruction the first couple of days, but the instruction really hits a higher pace after Labor Day. The other thing too to remember is that a high percentage of our students, especially at the high school, are involved with activities. And a lot of those sports and activities, they're starting in the middle of August. And then with our little kids, a lot of times they're so ready to come back and parents are really ready to have them come back too. So I think in Minnesota, a lot of those schools don't start until after Labor Day. But I would suggest starting as early as we can. In fact, if it wasn't for state statute, I would recommend a calendar where we start a little earlier than September 1st.
Any other questions? Okay, Janet, let's vote.
Anybody?
Okay, motion passes by unanimous vote of 8-0. Okay, move on to discussion items, policy review. And first up, state accountability report cards.
So Dave, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Brian Seglin is going to present on both of these first two items, the report cards and then the report card 2.0. So Brian, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
All right, well, thank you very much. First off, I'm very happy to be here tonight to talk about the state-issued district and school accountability report cards. These are the first report cards that have been issued in the last 2 years. There was a pause last school year on the publishing of these reports due to not having state assessments in the spring of 2020. The state accountability report cards are based off of state level assessment, attendance information, and other factors over a period of 3 years. So the report cards that we received this year were based off of last spring's state assessment and then the state assessment 2 and 3 years prior. This school year, I'm happy to report that in addition to the school district meeting expectations on the state accountability report cards, all of our buildings either met, exceeded, or significantly exceeded expectations on these reports. It's important to note that we had one school, Wakanda Elementary, that significantly exceeded expectations for both the student attendance, academic achievement, and growth over that period of time. That was an increase of 1 rating category for that school. We had 2 schools, Menomonie Middle School and River Heights Elementary, that exceeded expectations. Both of those buildings exceeded expectations on the previous accountability report card as well. And then our remaining 4 buildings, Menomonie High School, Downsville Elementary, Knapp Elementary, and Oaklawn, met expectations. And for the high school, Knapp and Downsville, that also marked an improvement over the previous accountability report card as well, as when we reported 2 years ago on those buildings. So a couple of things, or a handful of things to point out. We have a new reporting area this year on the accountability report cards. In previous years, when I sat before the board, we talked about a closing gaps target outcome area. That has been replaced with a target group outcome area. The closing gap score previously was we would take a look at the lowest performing subgroup within a building. So it might be students who are receiving services through an individualized education plan. It could be students from a low socioeconomic demographic or a combination thereof. And it's looking at how those students did in relation to other students. The target group outcome actually takes a look at your lowest performing students within a building or within the district, regardless of demographic group. It represents roughly the lowest quartile, and it really adds a lens of equity because it takes a look at all students who are not performing as well as their peers in their building, and it allows us to really focus in on there. So we'll learn more about that as we go on over the next few years. But it really allows us to identify a specific segment of our student population and help improve efforts with there. A couple of other things that I want to point out. Academic growth in our district continues to outpace our state comparable. That is something over the years our district has really done a nice job. When we take a look at how students have done on prior year assessments and prior grades and from one year to the next. Another area that we have seen is we have started to see our academic achievement levels on this report coming up. That has been something we've been working on for several years. In the area of math, we are above the state. In the area of ELA, we are just slightly below the state. But in both cases, that is an area that we've been working on. And to say that we are right there with our state comparable is an improvement on these reports over the years. A couple of new areas that were identified on the academic accountability report cards. Something that we have been focusing in on with our accountability report card 2.0 are some other areas where students can show growth. The state added in for information purposes at this point, doesn't factor into the overall score, but added in some additional categories for type of post-secondary preparation that students would be working on. They take a look at advanced courses, students who are enrolled in dual credit opportunities or dual enrollment, so they're receiving both high school credit and post-secondary credit. Taking a look at students who are working towards earning industry-recognized credentials. So an example might be a state employability certificate. In the tech ed area, we have students who will take some industry-based certifications and pick up those certifications. But then also, it takes a look at students who are involved in some type of work-based learning. So when we take a look at those areas, in the dual enrollment category, the industry-recognized credentials in work-based learning, we are either equal to or slightly above the state in each of those three comparable areas. Advanced courses, we are a little bit below the state at this point in time. That could be things such as advanced placement course or some other capstone courses that as a district we would identify. So that's an area we're looking at and we trend or take a look over time to see how we do in that area. The other area that was added in to take a look at as far as things that students are involved in, and again, this is reported at the high school level as opposed to the other levels, would be participation by type of arts course. So there's 4 categories that the state identifies as far as arts courses: art and design, dance, music, and theater. Now, I'll point out that as a district, we do not have a standalone dance course, and across the state, that is an area that there aren't very many districts that have standalone dance courses. In the area of music and theater, we are above the state comparable in that area. Art and design, we are a little bit below the state, and we are below the state in dance because we don't offer that. The state has 0.3% of students participate in that. So I think these are some nice areas to help speak to how well-rounded of an experience the students might have when they go through the high school. And for this first year, with this coming in, I think we're going to be able to look at this and help to make decisions moving forward. But I do think, when we take a look overall, we do a nice job. This matches up with some things that we've identified in some of our program review areas that we might want to take a look at as well. Chronic absenteeism is something I do want to point out. When we talked about this 2 years ago, was identified as an area of concern. We do still have more students who are chronically absent from school than I think any of us would like to have in place. However, we are seeing improvements, especially at the elementary level in this area. And we are seeing some improvements, I think, with our efforts that we're seeing at the middle school and high school as well. But chronic absenteeism, the student who misses more than 10% of the scheduled school days. And again, we're going to continue to work on that. And our principal's been doing a very nice job of some proactive communication on that. I do want to point out that chronic absenteeism, absenteeism as a whole, over the last 2 years, students who were absent for COVID-related exclusions or absences, that is not something that factors into chronic absenteeism. But we did notice that we did have families that would work and try and make a determination as to what they were going to do for instruction, whether it be in-person instruction or a virtual program. So that continues to be an ongoing conversation. As far as other things, when we go in, items that we're going to continue to work on as a district. I talked about improved attendance. That is an area that continues to be an area of emphasis at all levels, and looking to get our students in school with regular attendance, whether it's excused or not excused. Large gaps in attendance has a big impact on the students' overall success as well as their overall well-being in school. We continue to work to close achievement gaps within our 3 main identified subgroups or demographic groups that traditionally have lagged. Our areas of English language learners, students with disabilities, and our students who have a lower socioeconomic status. Our staff have done quite a bit of work in this area and continue to work to address those needs moving forward. And then, really, the last main piece as far as where we're gonna be focusing our efforts, we'll be working on continuing to promote both student achievement and academic growth. We have several items that are in place right now. All of our buildings have goals, which I've reported on previously, improving writing, literacy, and math in our buildings, and we continue to see gains in those areas. Our math and ELA program reviews continue to progress this year, and our staff have some really good ideas as far as next steps. The one nice thing that we're seeing so far is they feel that the work that we have done up to this point has paid dividends, especially in the areas of taking a look at providing supports for all learners, both remediation and extensions, and some additional staffing that we put forward in intervention areas for that purpose. So again, when we take a look at this report, it comes once a year in the fall, and it's based off of primarily our state assessments from the previous 3 years. We continue to see some nice movement, especially when we look at our last accountability report card that we had 2 years ago. So I'm happy to take any questions related to that piece before we transition into district accountability report card 2.0 that will look at factors outside of what we reported on the state report.
Any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. You touched on it a little bit. Actually, the absenteeism, my understanding is they did away with the deductions for it this year, and it's kind of COVID pandemic related because it wasn't really a fair assessment. Was there anything else that changed in the state report card kind of grading criteria, anything like that?
So the big piece is the standalone deductions went away. Essentially, the assessment was that districts would essentially be double penalized for some of those pieces. Test participation, the state did away with a 95% test participation requirement a couple of years ago as well. And I reported at the previous meeting, even with that, our participation last year still remained relatively high and those types of things. The target group outcome, that was the other main change. And they did adjust then, because of taking those deductions away, they did adjust the score ratings as far as what it means to meet expectations, exceed, or significantly exceed those expectations. It's not a direct correlation, but loosely, if you would have taken those deductions and applied them, it translates pretty closely to what it would have been. So even with those shifts, to see buildings making jumps into next categories, I think is a pretty good assessment of where we're at.
You exactly answered my question, because I was looking at that, because when this first came out, I noticed the DPI had lowered the threshold or the bar for these. They didn't on the exceeding expectations, but on the, the top category, they didn't change it all, but then on exceeding, they moved it from a 73 to a 70, the meets went from a 63 to a 58, and the meets few went from 53 to 48. So my first thought was, well, they're just lowering the bar, but then you take into account what you just explained, that it accounts for the absenteeism, and that stuff makes perfect sense. And then I looked at how it applied to our buildings in our district overall, and really, we didn't miss a beat. We actually went up on them, and so I was quite happy with that, because at first, when you just look at the meets expectation, well, if you change the grading scale, that's easy enough, but that didn't happen. So thanks for answering that.
No problem.
My short one dovetails on that. So and this is because I'm new, does that, the numbers that they started the adjustments with for COVID, right? So they adjusted. Do those change every year, kind of grade on the curve style with the group, or is that traditionally been, those are the cut points for the last 5-10 years?
Yeah, so the short answer is once they make a change, they typically stick with it for a few years. I would have to look back to get the exact number of years, but I want to say that overall, the criteria that they use hadn't changed for about 4 years. When they first rolled these out, they made a change a couple of years into it. I think this is probably our third change over the life of these report cards. And that does make it challenging to do a direct year-to-year comparison after they make a shift. So we have to base a lot of it on the comparable to the state, or the comparable within the categories themselves.
Any other questions? Chris?
Yeah, it's just such like a nightmare to try and break down data, because it's so, we have target groups that we're looking to improve, and we want to look at the overall experience of students in the district. So it's hard to tell if you want to go to the individual school scores, if you look at the overall scores, and then how I translate this to people that are asking me questions about where we're at. So it'd be fair to say that we are improving largely across the board, and that we made gains according to a state average. These are mostly driven by test scores, and that what I would advise parents to do is to talk directly with your teachers on the advisement days. Because I noticed my son didn't do as well as he was hoping on one of the test scores, but yet from the teacher feedback, he was like, he's great. And so sometimes taking these things out of context can be problematic. And so when I look at the overall scores, I think it says, and I just want to get this right because I don't want to screw up. But I think it says that the district's score was the same or higher than 40% of the districts in the state. So that means that 60% of the other districts in the state are scoring higher, but not significantly higher. And that in relationship to state achievement, we're increasing slowly over time. And the one area that we were thinking about concentrating on is the higher achievement category, where we see nice gains lowering the floor, but that maybe we want to focus on some of the experiences on the higher end, or the higher achievement part of the students based on the classes they're taking. Does that sound correct to you?
I would say it does.
Okay, thanks. It's hard to manage all the different statistics and the graphs and everything, and trying to get something that is translatable to people is important to me. So thank you so much.
Yep, you hit on a lot of pieces, and what I will say on these new report cards, you look at them and somebody may say it's hard to interpret these. These are, in my opinion, a lot easier to interpret than our previous version of these.
Yeah.
So these changes were nice, when we go and take a look at them.
Oh,
Chris?
and this is just a follow-up question. So when we look at some curriculum changes that are coming up later, some of those, like the ELA class maybe was taking into account some of the readings that you got off of these scores with the staff and thinking about how we can address some of those things. Does that sound right too?
Any other questions?
All right, so accountability report card 2.0. This is a document that we put in place, it would have been several years ago, and we saw a change in the overall design of the state accountability report card. So 2016, 2017 was the first year that we did this. I did not deliver this report to you last year because we had many items that ultimately did not happen the prior year when a lot of our activities were limited. When we take a look at the accountability report card 2.0, there is a little bit of overlap now with some of these supplemental areas that are being incorporated into the state report, but I think for context, it's good to go ahead and put these into place. A couple of items that I do want to point out is if you look directly at this year's accountability report card 2.0 for the district, and you look at the one we did 2 years ago, there are some areas that either aren't reported this year because some of our activities didn't happen. An example would be last fall, at the middle school, there was an event that's referred to as Smart Girls Rock. It's a 6-8 STEAM event. That did not run 2 years ago, and it also did not run last year. My understanding is they're evaluating whether or not to run that this year. And then we take a look at our middle school and high school, and some of the co-curricular activities did not run last school year. So we do still see some lower participation counts when we look at this report to the one 2 years prior. But even with all of that going on, we do have some areas that we did see some increase in numbers of students participating. The number of students that took AP classes as well as took AP exams. went up. The number of students that participated in youth apprenticeships went up. And we saw a decrease, and this is the area we want to see a decrease in the percent of students with 5 or fewer, or excuse me, it was an increase with the number of students that had 5 or fewer documented behavior incidents, which actually means that that number, the number got bigger, which is what we want to see happen. As the last report, we have the same number of students that participated and earned state-sponsored employment skills certificates in a career and tech ed area. That happened when we actually got fewer kids in the buildings. So that was nice, that number stayed the same. We did see a slight dip in the number of students that earned a score of 3 or above on their AP exam. So while more students took the exam, we saw a slight dip in the number of the students who earned that 3 or higher. And that's a goal that we set for that. We saw it's a slight dip in the number of students who earned the Gold Scholar or GX certificates, but very similar to, I want to say, what was the number we had 3 years ago. So we've seen that number climb and dip just a little bit. Overall, in 6 through 12, like I mentioned, with some of our activities not participating or not running, we did see a dip in overall student activity participation counts. An example would be in school, we didn't run the musical or a school play last school year. And I know our organizations are looking at whether or not to run those events, and many of those events are back on this year. So I anticipate those numbers will climb. K-5 Battle of the Books would be another example, and elementary student council was another area too. But what I'm happy to report when I take a look at this overall is, even with all the challenges that were present within the last school year, we still had many opportunities for students to be involved, be it in person and virtually. I can speak to my own 2 sons, middle school and high school, Science Olympiad being an example. While many of the events didn't happen in person, they still had an opportunity virtually to participate in those. And I think our staff have done a remarkable job of making sure that we provide a balanced experience for our students. So happy to take any questions you did.
Any questions, Angie?
I have one question. Is there anything in the works so that when students are absent, speaking of like the higher absenteeism and trying to control that, when they are absent, it is easier to log on and see what they're missing and complete that work and that sort of thing to be able to stay on track? I mean, it seems like we have teachers are using a varying degree of different methods. And so something that's more uniform, district-wide, so that we can bridge that gap better.
Sure. So, we did take a look, it would have been going into last school year to support our staff in utilizing Google Classroom as our main learning management system, and working to make sure that students know how to access those pieces and make sure that those pieces are posted. I know it's an ongoing conversation that we have with staff at the building level, and building principals have, and teachers within the departments as to what type of activities translate well to virtual and which ones don't when students are in and out. And I know at the K2 level, we utilize a platform that's called Seesaw. It's not as robust as what a Google Classroom experience would look like. But it is something that we continue to take a look at as to whether or not the platform that we use meets our students' needs. So I guess if there's a challenge that's in place, we always encourage families and students to make sure that they reach out to their individual teacher on how to access that and provide some assistance with that.
You have questions? Chris?
I just had a quick one about, we had a higher number of students that were taking the AP exams. We had a lower number of students getting where we want them to succeed. And I just want to follow up on some discussion we had. So the last board meeting where we were talking about some of the online experiences. And I know that I don't know if there was a way we could try to map out some of the kids in terms of their experiences in those AP platforms. Like I would assume the kids would have an in-person AP class. those types of experiences tend to have better effect on your longer term memory and your scores and these types of exams. A student who is taking in person versus online would have a much greater, well, I won't say much, but have a greater chance of success. So is that worthwhile to try to map out and see why that, because it's a little concerning to be like, oh, we got more kids taking the exam, but then on the other hand, we got more kids that aren't getting the scores we want. And just thinking about what would be the causality of something up there.
Yeah, and I think in addition to having conversation, which our staff, our staff do talk through, if it's our staff last year that delivered the instruction, it was an in-person, except for that short period of time where we were shut down. We did have some students that did a WBS experience, and we've talked about that. The other piece last year that was unique to prior years, and again, whether or not this was the driver in this or not, we don't know for sure. But we did run on a block schedule last school year as well, and our AP courses, in a block schedule, you had a scenario where, and it wasn't just our AP courses, but some of our courses that went a year long or a semester where students didn't necessarily have the class back to back in quarters. So I know, speaking from my own son's experience, where he had a quarter with a class and a quarter off, and then he had a quarter with the class. So there was a gap there, which presents a challenge. Our AP teachers did have some concerns with, what that experience would have. Again, it was a logistical challenge that we had. So I'm really interested to see the experience that our students have this year being on the 7-period day or 8-period day, and what will that look like. So I think there were a lot of factors that went into that.
Okay, other questions for Brian?
I would just offer the comment that thank you, Brian, for being the messenger. I take the bulk of this as very positive. Certainly appreciate all the work that goes into what we need to improve on, because we're never done getting better. But I think I would want the teachers, the building principals, the paraeducators, the coaches, all those folks that worked with these kids through this last 2 years to help support this improvement in some of the outcomes, because that's, without them, it doesn't happen either. So I just kind of want to put that on the record.
Well said. Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Brian. Move on to item 3C, new course proposals for 2022.
So as part of the timeline, as we continue to prepare for next year, Mr. Drake and his staff at the high school have been working with Brian in terms of what new courses could be offered next year. And the board has received a write-up of those courses. And Mr. Drake and Brian are here to answer any questions that the board might have. Are there any questions on these proposals?
I guess I anticipated them talking about it a little bit, so
Sure.
just kind of give us the default view of
Great.
what the thinking was. Yeah.
All right, so as far as new courses that have come forward, our health department, as part of their program review that they completed just a little over a year ago, are bringing forth a recommendation for a course around leadership as an elective. In the area of Phi-Ed, we have a handful of electives, but from a health standpoint, we do not currently at the secondary level have an elective course. In taking a look at how to best prepare students for opportunities post-secondary, the department felt that this would be a good complement, to that program area, that department area. Would look at leadership skills, something that's going to be, again, character development, and change within their school or community, explore several different topics around that area. It's something that would align very well with pillars 1 and 2 of our strategic plan. Our special education department last school year ran a pilot class with a very small number of students in it, but it was a special education classroom assistant, and this was a pilot, again, last year that, or I should say it's running this year, we proposed it last school year, for students who might have an interest in pursuing a career in special education. And again, the staff who work with the students found it to be very beneficial to help in the classroom, but also for the students to have some hands-on experience working with students with disabilities, learning about inclusion and occupations that involve working with individuals with disabilities. So again, very good alignment to Pillar 1. So those 2 courses would be something we bring forward at a future meeting for approval because they're new ads. They go into the course, the description handbook, students would sign up for them, and then we would look at filling those classes. The English Language Arts Department has asked to run a pilot for next school year, not something that would require board approval, but whenever we do something like this, I like to make sure that we inform the board. The idea behind the course would be to provide an elective within the department. For a course, it's designed to create lifelong readers. The course would change a little bit from year to year as far as the selected text that would be used, but it would be built on helping students not only build appreciation for literacy, but build skills in those areas, as well as writing and doing some analysis of writings and things like that. The other benefit with this pilot is we know that we have students who may need to make up a half a credit within the English Language Arts area. English Language Arts is one of the only areas that students are required to earn 4 credits within that content area. So if you look across 4 years, the student has to earn 1 credit each of the 4 years, and as we look to help our student support, the idea behind this is the student can choose to take it just because they want to take it. At the same time, a student who needs to make up a half a credit because they didn't earn the full credit a prior year, it provides us an opportunity to remediate that credit or for that student to earn that additional half credit within the school year, as opposed to waiting until summer to make it up during summer school or trying to make it up through a virtual option during the school year. So it provides a little more flexibility. In talking that through the department, they thought that would be a useful option as well. The reason we're choosing to run it as a pilot next school year is we want to see both is there a need for that, but then also the demand moving forward as well. So it gives us an opportunity to be a little more responsive. So.
Thank you.
Just to follow up down, Brian, so would that be kind of run like an independent study type situation, or are they actually in the classroom doing that?
They would be in the classroom, so a student would take it in place of an elective in another area. And again, it's another option. We have a handful of half credit ELA classes, but not a lot of them. And it just gives another option to do that. And it's also, the way it's being proposed is a little more flexible with the design of what the experience for the student would look like as well.
Well, I got the mic, I'll say I like the special education option too. I think that's great. It's kind of like an apprenticeship type model, which is kind of neat.
I agree. Amy?
I have a question about the special ed. Is that I assume that's the whole district, right? It's not just in the high school, we can talk about the high schools and help.
So, right now, based on the pilot, it had been at the high school. Maybe Mr. Drake is up here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more, he's working a little closely with the staff.
Yeah, so it's been utilized just at the high school so far. We haven't had any discussion about it being incorporated outside the high school at all, although that's not a bad idea. It's been really focused on a couple of classrooms that have some of the students with our highest needs. And we're trying to identify students that want to work either in special education, like Mr. Segman mentioned, or working with individuals in their adult life who also have disabilities somehow. So we've had maybe 4 or 5 students that have been working in that classroom or classrooms this year. And it's been pretty successful so far. It's pretty good reviews on both ends. They get a ton of hands-on experience. They don't really have a scheduled hour for like classroom setting, like to learn about it. They do some of the things that are described there really on their own, and then they have check-in meetings with our teachers. But much of their time is working with our students.
I think it'd be great to maybe later on, just get started, but I think it'd be good to allow that. I know when I was in high school, When I was a senior, I had a half day off and I went the other half day and worked with a first grade teacher in a classroom. For the senior high school, so I know. With a regular classroom, but still, same concept.
I think that's a great idea, and we can look at that as we grow it.
And then the other thing I just wanted to say is, I like that literature or literature pilot, can I audit that class and take it myself?
Okay, any other questions? Carl?
Two-part question, really, I guess. The health leadership, just so I understand, this is something maybe somebody who's maybe thinking about a nurse or something would take, so you're learning leadership skills through the lens of health behaviors and physical activity, that kind of stuff, or is this more universal than that? Like, who's the student that would take that, and then does it and any of the others have prerequisites that have to be done before they were able to do these?
So second question first, no, there's no prerequisites for any of them. It could just be any student that's interested in those. The first part of the question, more of a general outlook, not necessarily health sciences related. However, that could definitely be a focal point for that course. It's really about making healthy decisions and trying to, like the idea of goal setting and reaching those goals, and then a community service aspect with it as well. So trying to develop that leadership that we probably all have, and that could be helpful for us to, I guess, highlight and see outside of the classroom at times.
The lead by example component.
Correct.
Thank you. Charlie?
Two questions, both related to your use of the term pilot. On the special education assistant, will you remove the moniker of pilot then and have that course be a full-time course going into the future? And then, I think I know the answer to this, but I want to ask you just to be sure. On your literature elective pilot, you talk about that being credit recovery, but that's not only for credit recovery, right? Another kid could take it not just for credit recovery? Okay, thank you.
So I was just gonna say, we see sometimes students who, like, say, fail first semester English 1 through 9th grade, and they're unable to recover that credit in the summer for whatever reason. Sometimes we place them back into English 2, so sophomore English, and also the first semester of English 1. It's not always the best dynamic to be in, as a repeat situation. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. So this would just be another kind of tool in the toolbox to give a different set of experiences to the kids to still recover that. Along with kids who are just interested in reading and whatever topics that they're going to be interested in.
Any other questions? Okay, thank both of you. Okay, moving on to item 3D, 2022-23 budget plan and timeline.
I think it was 7 years ago or 7 or 8 years ago we put this together because the budgeting process can be challenging, and making sure that we understand the process we think is very important. So I appreciate that Leah was able to put this together again this year, just to kind of lay out for the board. You can see that we're already in the process of working on the 2022-2023 budgeting plan. A lot of it happens in the summer, but in terms of getting information from the state, but there's a ton that happens really after we get back from the winter break, in terms of getting teacher involvement, department involvement with budget requests, and then we kind of go from there. So this process has been very effective, but I guess just wanted to share it with the board and see if any board members have questions or any suggestions for changing the budget process.
I see nothing, so, okay. All right, we'll move on to item E, SDMA work plan for 2021-2022.
So on July 12th, seems like it was just yesterday, but, well, I guess it depends on how you look at it. The board approved the strategic goals and work plan for this school year. And at that time, we started to get the understanding that COVID could be an issue again this year. So the board prioritized some of the goals in each of the pillar areas. So in this report for the board, you can see that the goals that the board prioritized are all bolded, but there still are additional goals that are being worked on beyond the bolded goals. Each of the goals has been given a status rating whether it's completed or on track for completion, on hold perhaps, and being considered for second semester, and then some things that are on hold indefinitely. But I'm very proud of the work that our leadership team has done, working with our staff to accomplish so many of these goals. And I'm very pleased that not only do I feel that all of the prioritized goals are going to be accomplished this year, I think a lot of the goals that weren't the top priorities are also going to be completed based on the schedule that was set forth. But instead of going through goal by goal, I guess I would just open it up for any questions that board members might have at this point. Otherwise, it's simply a status update.
Okay.
Anybody?
Okay, thanks for providing that, Joe. Okay, move on to item 3F, announce a special meeting of the SDMA directors.
So as previously discussed, there is a very small parcel of land at the entrance of the school forest. And in order to have the school district retain that land and that entrance in perpetuity, it's important that the board take a look at that. And in order to make a land purchase, even as small as this one, there needs to be a special meeting of the electors. So that notice has been set and being advertised. So at the beginning of the next school board meeting on December 13th, there'll be a special meeting of the electors for anybody to come in and provide feedback on that land purchase.
Amy?
Does that mean they also get to vote too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a half an acre, and I think the purchase price was around 2,000 with closing costs and stuff added on as well, so. Any other questions? Okay, item G, announce or review extracurricular staff requests for your information. And item H, our next meeting will be December 13th, as Dr. Zadowski indicated. That is also the day that the mask mandate becomes optional in the district, just in case anybody had any questions about that. Otherwise, we don't have a meeting the second week, or second meeting in December because of the holidays. So with that, if there's no questions, take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Amy, is there a second?
Second.
Chris, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.